Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to DAT Poker Podcast. This is episode 113, the DAT Poker Podcast, brought to you by Daniel Negreanu's Masterclass of Poker. And we have a new main event champion. The last World Series of Poker ever at the Rio, last World Series main event anyway, has completed. We're going to talk all about that now. But first, before we get started, we have a very special guest. Before we get started, as always, our producer, Ross Henry, the pride of Bowen Island.
This is the most cursed podcast I've ever been a part of.
Very cursed. But our very special guest this week, this man has been at the forefront of poker content creation and reporting and everything. He is the senior media manager at PokerGO, where you just watched the World Series of Poker. Rinkema. Remko, it's so awesome to chat with you again. It's been a minute.
Yeah, thanks, guys, for dragging me out to the Rio again on my day off. I made promises to Adam, and I will pull through on those promises. And yeah, I'm just glad to be on the show, guys. I listen whenever I can. Obviously, it's been busy during WSOP, but I'm happy to help you out. Is Adam on some kind of a rejuvenation retreat? Make himself younger or something?
Yeah, it's a silent meditation. He's not allowed to talk for, I think, 25 days, and he's eating nothing but like water and saltines. I don't know what he does. He's a real job now. I don't know. I don't even know whether we should let him continue to host the show. I think the rule is if you get a job that's outside of poker that you no longer, I don't know, but yeah, it's been a while. And Remko, you've worn so many hats, in the poker space. You've worked with almost everybody, and now you are here at PokerGO. It feels like the poker world is sort of, consolidating media, and you're at the front of the leader in the way of that industry of putting poker in front of people's eyeballs.
Yeah, it's been really exciting, honestly. This journey that I've been on has been a very long one. I can think back of when I did my first reporting on a tournament in English back in 2011, World Series of Poker Europe in Cannes. I think back of the ACOP when I was there with Ross and Adam, doing the 2+2 PokerCast from Macau, which was amazing. And also, just having you on the Remko report, Terrence, way back in the day. And I recorded that from my parents' second bedroom. So I've traveled a long way, and now I live in Vegas, and now I'm basically all day, every day at the Rio at WSOP, and just feel, very lucky to work for PokerGO. And, lots of moving pieces, lots of things to discuss. We had an amazing WSOP main event final table, so I'm pretty sure we have plenty of angles to touch upon. So yeah, let's get right into it.
Yeah, definitely. All day, every day at the Rio for 3 more days, and then you never have to set foot in the place again if you don't want to. That's going to be something. Well, I feel like every poker podcast is definitely going to talk about the Rio nostalgia for a little bit, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But yes, I said,
I have a hot take here right off the bat.
Yes, go.
I think that we will hate the Rio until the first day of the new location.
Oh, that's obvious. Yeah, when you're trying to find parking and we realize there's the bathroom situation is not good or something, and we'll find something to complain about because we're poker players and that's what we do. And obviously there are going to be very real growing pains. For as much as we like to talk about how grumpy we are, there's going to be real logistic issues moving something of this size. I think about how long, PokerStars, say, for example, had the PCA in the exact place over and over. Why do they do it? Not because the Atlantis is so great to have a poker tournament. It's because it's been there. You understand the logistics. It's been at the Rio for 16 years now. And they've figured out the logistics, and we're gonna do this all over again next year in 2022.
Yeah, I think there's serious pros and cons to both locations, and the obvious Rio ones are this place is a dump. Well, I mean, there's lots of dumps in Vegas, and who knows how great Bally's is going to be. But the one thing I've heard that's a huge positive of Bally's is that the space is even bigger, so even more room. And if they can find proper staffing, which I think they will have much less issues with in 2022, because, and this is something that I never knew until this year, they tend to use a lot of school teachers that have time off in the summer that take summer jobs to become dealers and runners and even assistant floor managers and stuff like that. So that issue will no longer be a thing going into the 2022 WSOP. If you add that up to the larger space, maybe we can avoid some more tan-hand play. And then one of the obvious cons is going to be parking, which a lot of people are already concerned about. But then one of the pros could be more stragglers walking into the Bally's, which is something you will never have at the Rio because we're tucked away in a corner next to an enormous parking lot, as opposed to being squeezed in between major casinos. So I think from a poker action side of point of view, I think this could be a really, really good positive move. Logistically, I have a lot of reservations, but we'll see how it plays out. But I also think it's kind of exciting to have a sort of a fresh place to go to for 2022.
For sure, it's really going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. And yeah, I missed so much of the World Series this year, and I feel like I never want to miss it again. But obviously, this year a little bit different than most years, the World Series of Poker. But you had a pretty much front row seat to the World Series of Poker main event, as you've had for the entire World Series of Poker, or at least all the televised final table streams. You have to be really happy. Well, first of all, Koray Aldemir is your 2021 World Series of Poker main event champion. Just fantastic poker being played. But, before we get into all of that, you have to have been really happy with this, because this was probably the most entertaining World Series final table in a long time. And at least in my opinion, like I watch this thing. I don't always watch it a lot of the time. I'm just like, it's on in the background, but I'm not really paying attention, or I'll sort of watch the highlights the next day. But this one, other than putting my kid to bed, I was watching this one all the way through.
Absolutely. One of the shortest as far as hands played final tables, which speaks in favor of excitement and action. I think that I cannot remember a final table in which we had this many big pots and this many all-ins condensed into a short period of time. At times, it felt like we were watching a condensed broadcast of the final table, just because how quickly these big pots were following each other up.
It was like every hand was like a highlight hand, like one of those hands that you guys show when there's a dinner break. Like, let's just show the highlights of all the fun, important pots. It was like every hand was like that almost. And a lot of that due to the way that George Holmes, the runner-up, the amateur Fermenta, the way he played. He wasn't there to ladder. He wasn't intimidated by the super high roller pro in Koray Aldemir. He just went in and guns blazing, like, fuck you, 3-bet, 4-bet, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly, and I think it takes that kind of approach and personality to make a final table exciting, especially when the play is relatively deep compared to most of the other WSOP events. And you just have to get a little bit lucky with having the right kind of people in place to make this into an entertaining final table, because for the most part at this final table, at least leading up to three-handed play, Koray Aldemir was just sitting back, watching the other players play. Of course, he caught a massive punt from Lococo, and that sort of changed, that changed probably everyone's perspective on going from how do I win this to how do I finish second, because that's really separated him in a way that it was almost impossible to mount a serious comeback. So aside from that hand, it was mostly Holmes playing the big pots, but it was from the very first hand that we saw that there was just more action than I would, otherwise assume would happen at the main event final table. And even if we go back to Hossein Ensan, I think that ended at 4 a.m. and they played for 3 days. There's only a 2-day final table. If we go back to John Sin, that finished at 6 a.m, I remember going for breakfast right after the final table finished. So I'm scrolling through the coverage here, trying to figure out the one thing I wanted to note here. Chase Bianchi, exemplary of the action. It gets raised to 1.6 million. He rejams with King Queen offsuit on the fourth hand of play. I mean, we've seen far nittier final tables, and this was a delight. We were talking about it on set, me and Jeff Platt. We were saying like, wow, I actually was entertained almost the entire time, which is not very frequently that it happens. But yeah, I had a great time. I think this final table will be looked back upon with a lot of positive feelings, even though these names not really resonate yet, aside from Koray Aldemir and George Holmes, because they really were the spice of
it. Wasn't a star power final table. We've had some star power final tables in the past, and this wasn't it. If you just read the names on the list, unless you're like an Argentinian rap fan, you probably didn't recognize most of these. But I wonder, you talked about the early bust outs. I think the first 3 busts out were quite quick. A lot of that probably was the function of the payouts. Me and Adam talked about this last week. The very steep jump from 10th to 9th, followed by the very small ladders from 9th to 6th. I think only about 100,000 the average one. So, when you got 22 big blinds like Chase Bianchi or some of these guys did, it doesn't hurt very much to reshove a bit light and try to build a stack. But to your earlier point, I think a lot of people would have gone into the final table thinking, oh boy, Koray Aldemir, most seasoned player, by far the most tournament winnings. He's got all the chips too. I think he had 35% of the chips when we started the final table. He's just going to be able to grind these guys down. Like he's just going to steal all the pots where nobody flops anything. And he's just going to like put pressure on these guys to ladder. But as you said, this wasn't what happened. These guys came to play. A part of that again, because those ladder jumps early on were so small. But again, also because in some way, again, we talk about George Holmes, he did not give a fuck. And that was just awesome to see. But yeah, so I want to talk about the big final hand because it's one of the best hands I've ever, it's got to be probably one of the top 3 main event hands ever in terms of a finishing hand. I mean, we all remember the Johnny Chan, Eric Seidel hand from round, because we've seen it in rounders. We all remember the Scotty Wen, you call it's going to be all over, baby, against Kevin McBride. I think this is up there with them because it's just a perfect example of this aggressive amateur, stepping a little bit too far to the line, it seems. And the top pro kind of gets puts to the test and passes the test. So if you haven't seen it, of course, go back and watch it, but you probably have. I'll recap the action real quick. George Holmes on the button. He has the king of spades, king of clubs and the queen of spades. And he makes it 6 million. Koray Aldemir with 10-7 of diamonds in the big blind calls. Remember, there's the 2 point. They're playing 1.2 million, 2.4 million with also the big blind ante at that point. So ranges get really loose, as you kind of saw here throughout the other hands where, there's a lot of trash being played. Flop comes down, 10 of hearts, 7 of spades, 2 of hearts. So Aldemir flopping, top 2 pair. Holmes really with just the overcards and backdoor straight draws. Aldemir checks to Holmes. Holmes bets 6 million and Koray check raises him to 19 million. And this is really the pivotal point of the hand, because I think a lot of people would have just given up with the 2 overcards and the backdoor. He doesn't have like a backdoor flush draw or anything like that. There's 2 hearts out there. But he decides to make the peel, and he peels, for him, what will end up be the card that seals his fate. It's the king of spades. He makes top pair. Koray still with 2 pair. Koray, after check raising the flop, bets 36.5 million, and George Holmes calls. The river is the 9 of clubs, so our final board is 10-7 deuce king 9. Koray checks, planning to induce a bluff, and he, in a sense, gets it. George Holmes overshoves the pot. I think it was 133 into 110. I'm not sure. Maybe exactly the right pot size, but it's over a pot size bet. And Koray Aldemir has to think of this. Is almost all the chips in play, by the way. If Koray loses this hand, if he calls and he's wrong, he has 9 million, and George Holmes has whatever, right? Like just hundreds of millions. This is basically the whole tournament. They are playing for the main event title. They were playing for $3.7 million of real dollars here. This is the size of the pot. Koray Aldemir thinks and finally makes the call. I mean, what a fantastic final hand.
Yeah, absolutely mind-blowing final hand. And one of the discussions that we had after the fact was, is it more exciting if the main event ends with a huge pre-flop all-in where we're sweating cards and we're sort of like in this tense moment? Or is it greater to have something like this where you're on the river? And the answer to that question, in my opinion, is for the audience in person, not being able to see the cards is very weird. Because the hand it's on the PokerGO YouTube channel. It's an 11-minute hand. It's crazy. It's such a long hand. So when you're standing on the rail with the beer in your hand, you're like wondering what the hell is going on. Like you're just thinking about like what ranges could they have, because you can only see the board. Right. You can sort of barely make out the bet sizes. But then when you're watching it on TV and you have the whole cards, this of course is way more exciting, because all of a sudden you arrive on the river and Holmes was so unpredictable that even in that moment, you could not have predicted that he would just overshove all in. And then when he does that, you put yourself in the shoes of Koray Aldemir, a seasoned pro, a veteran of the game who's been in many, many tough spots. He's been at that same exact table, in that same exact setting, in the 111K big one for one drop, 3-handed with Fedor Holtz and Dan Smith. This guy has been under a ton of pressure in a ton of big spots. But then all of a sudden, you're facing this guy from Atlanta, home game Holmes, all in, oversized shove. And if you call, like you said, it's over if you're wrong. And then you have 2 pair in that spot. I would crumble up, shrivel, and disappear under the table, not knowing what to do. I would start hyperventilating. If you think that the tanking was excessive at this final table, if I was in that spot, I would have thought for 4.5 days. I would have called help, asked the audience, because what do you do there? Terrence, you're the
I was surprised it was as quick as it was, because honestly, like like I will call the clock on anyone. Like if you've been at my table, I've probably called the clock on you at some point. Like that's I can't stand slow play. But if ever there was a situation, it's a literal $3.7 million pot, not chips, $1 million pot, and for the World Series title. Of course, it means that. And I think if Aldemir is in a pot, like you say, against a Fedor Holtz or a Dan Smith, yeah, he's going to call, like, because he understands that those guys are going to have all of these different bluffs. Like, it's in, if you throw it in the solver, and I've been told this by top pros, if you throw it in the solver, it's a very clear call. But this isn't solver land we're talking about. You don't get to play solver poker against the dude from Atlanta who, this was his, he had what, like 50,000 in tournament winnings or some point. He'd never won an actual poker tournament before. You've been playing with this guy. You've seen him play tight. Seen him play loose. You've seen him play passive. You've seen him get aggressive. You've seen him make big laydowns. He's done all this stuff that is not by the book. It's so much harder. And the temptation is to want to be like, I'm the experienced pro. I'm going to do all this guy. I can fold and still be left with like whatever, a 2-1 chip deficit. If I fold, not even that, I think it's even less than that. If he folds, like, we're 100 big blinds deep. I want to play deep stack poker against this guy. But man, the such kudos to have the courage to make the call in that spot, to know that it's the correct call. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. Because again, who would have thought that the George Holmes turns king queen into a bluff there? Or I don't even know if it's a bluff or a value shove, to be honest. I don't know if you guys have talked to him.
Isn't that the beauty of the game, though? Is that even someone like yourself, who's been around this game for such a long time, to this moment, cannot decide and figure out whether it was for value or whether it was a bluff. Right. I think that's what makes this game so beautiful. And I've been having this discussion for many years at this point about, how GTO makes poker more boring. I think that every single evolution of the game makes the game greater. And I also think that having the blend of pros and amateurs is ultimately what makes this game the most exciting to watch. So that's why the main event final table will always be that marquee moment that we all look forward to, because you can have these crazy moments. You can have the Darvin Moons of the world just going completely bonkers and bananas and putting these pros in spots where, just go figure it out. You have the pressure on you. You figure it out. You are the top pro. And ultimately, Koray clicked call and he made the right decision. But, that was about as glorious of a showdown as you could have ever imagined, given the two player types going heads up for the title. And I would have, as much as I like Koray, I've known him for many years, as much as I would love to see him be that representative of the book community in a small sort of way as the champ. And because I have a personal relationship with him, I was rooting for him. I would have loved to see George Holmes as the champ. Have him go on late night talk shows, have him be the everyman ambassador of the game. I hate when people say, is this good for poker or bad for poker?
Yeah.
But I think George Holmes winning would have definitely been exciting to see, and how that would then further progress.
Yeah, I agree. It's just this. It's a great story. It's one we haven't seen in a long time. And he just seems like just a great guy to root for. I mean, you sort of see the reaction on Twitter universally. Like, everybody was like, I want this guy to win. Back like on day 6. Was it day 6 when he ran it up from one big blind? I don't remember exactly. Yeah. Day 6 when he ran it up from one big blind, and he even had some pretty gangster bluffs those days. Like, people just loved his style of poker. It was erratic. It wasn't, GTO or by the book or something, but it put people in fits. And yeah, he ran good, no question. Like, a lot of the time he would just flop bottom pair and turn trips. Like, and that's, and you get full value from that because you've shown down all these weird bluffs in the past. But George Holmes put himself in a spot to win. And one of the things I've been thinking about all day is that, it's people talk about, can an amateur still win the main event of the World Series of Poker? Can a non-pro, guy who's not, in the lab running PIO every day, can that guy still win the main event of the World Series of Poker? And the answer, I think George Holmes just demonstrated, is yes. You can't do it if you're going to be passive, and if you're going to try to play quote unquote ABC poker, and you play the way that poker books taught you to play in the 90s and stuff like that. But if you play the way George Holmes did, and you hit a heater, like, you're a threat. I mean, and he was far from the only ones. A lot of these guys at the final table were inexperienced players. I'm looking at Josh Remidio and Alejandro Lococo, Papo MC. Obviously, like, these guys are probably not in the solver streets all the time and grinding all the online tournaments. You have a shot if you're an amateur and you play aggressively. Ross, you had something?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on Holmes because he definitely made this final table the most fun to see in years. But I felt like physically bad for him when he did get called, and I just wanted to bring up because I feel like his face kind of shows like, oh, it's over, like I got caught. But let's see here.
Oh, we're stealing some copyrighted content, Remko.
It's all right. It's PokerGO.
I'm in charge of copyrights, so I think we're okay.
But I feel like that face is just like, oh, I guess that's it. I guess I just lost. But
yeah. Go ahead, Remko.
Are you subscribed to our YouTube channel, Ross? I'm just making sure. That's my job.
Otherwise, there's a lawsuit coming.
Exactly. So one of the things I wanted to emphasize, and by the way, for those listening and enjoying my voice, I've done a podcast every single day of the main events. We've done daily shows every night. That's why I've been staying up till 6 a.m. And then taking my dog for a walk before going to bed. And we did a nightly podcast, and we try to speak to as many people as possible at the end of every night. So if you're a big fan of the main events, I can highly encourage on your next 24-hour world round trip plane ride to just listen to all of them in a row, because they're pretty exciting to listen to. One of the things that I had a chance to that I was really happy with is I got a chance to talk to George Holmes twice, once on day 7 and once after he busted in 3rd place. And both times he echoed the same sentiment. And that sentiment was, I'm just having such a good time. I'm loving this. I'm playing my own game. I'm not adjusting what I think for anyone. I'm not looking at the payouts, and I'm just having fun. And he said the same thing after he busted. He said, I had a great time. I'm sorry it ended. I was hoping to win, but ultimately that's what he kept saying. I'm having such a good time. This is so amazing. He kept also saying, I hope more people do this and come out and play and experience this themselves. So, ultimately, if you can have fun with the game and catch a heater, it just means that there's still hope for people like Ross and myself to win the main event one day.
Yeah, I definitely don't have the balls that he does. Like, I've gotten like physically ill feeling making like a $700 bluff, and he was just like balling out and just like completely stone faced, not sweating.
I think it's part of the difference is I think when you were making the $600 sick bluff, you were thinking about how much rent money it was. But this is a guy with a day job, and it seems like a good job. He's in the finance industry and all that. So I think it's a lot easier for a guy like that to take some of these lines and
fine without it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of while we're just on the George Holmes Love Fest, which I'll happily continue for a long time. I'm thinking back to when he was 3-handed with Jack Oliver still in the mix, and I don't remember the exact action, but I think it was Aldemir opens the button, Oliver calls in the small with like a king, some kind of suited king, and then Holmes just shoves for the whole stack with like king deuce suited or something like that. Just no fucks given about laddering or anything like that, because I believe I don't remember if it was Hugh or Oliver, it was a short stack at the time, but it was just like, I'm not going to play for second. I'm just going to play my game, like what Remko said. And it was so refreshing, so fun to see, back to what we talked about the beginning with this aggressive play. But a lot of this aggressive play, like, it demonstrates that it's correct. When it goes bad, it looks bad. I think a lot of people also, they're afraid to make the aggressive play because you look stupid on TV. You could have, going back to the Koray Aldemir 10-7 hand, if he calls there and like George Holmes just has the set, like, he's gonna be like, oh, that's so gross, you're gonna feel bad. But it takes a pro, or at least it takes a lot of heart to make those plays that potentially look stupid and realize that it's gonna look dumb if this goes wrong. But I feel like in the moment it's the right thing to do. And when we talk about all this, the solvers versus field play, I think that's a big part of it.
100%.
So you mentioned 233, you mentioned it was one of the shortest final tables we had. It was 223 was the final count. I think the John Sin year, I looked it up, was like over like 580. You mentioned that. And we've had broadcasts that went even longer. And the pace of the play I thought was really good for as long as that final hand took, obviously, because it was 100 BB deep for all of the chips. I thought the pace of play was great. We've had some years where guys were just like tanking in very obvious checker bet situations or call or fold situations. I thought the pace of play was actually really good. People took the time they needed, but they weren't tanking on nonsense bullshit non-decisions. You know, what did you think? Are we getting to a point now where people realize like, hey, you don't have to sit there with 6 deuce offsuit under the gun and pretend to be thinking about something. When you get caught bluffing on the river and the guy jams all in, it's okay to just fold. Are we gonna get to that point?
It's a very strange situation. I feel like on a person to person basis, there's a wide range of approaches to this. And I feel as though we are slowly but surely educating the masses on it being okay to snap fold in certain spots. I think that some of the top pros are actually hurting this cause the most by having a style in which they always take a lot of time, whether it's to be balanced or whether they're trying to look at a bird outside to see if they can randomize in some kind of capacity. The bird goes left. I gotta bluff X percentage of time. So I don't know. I feel like this is a never-ending discussion, and there's no right answer. But I do know that the clock also is not the answer, because I've seen many times when there's a 30-second shot clock, action clock, whatever you want to call it, when that's in place, people will start using the time. So they'll see the clock running and like, oh, I still have 30 more seconds. 30 seconds is a really long time. Like if 9 players all take 30 seconds before making the decision pre-flop, that's going to be a horrible, horrible slow pace. So
not even pre-flop. Like people think like 30 seconds pre-flop, whatever, but after the flop doesn't matter. But just the average situation where like, if you raise Remko under the gun and I call out of the big blind and it comes ace king, I am never donk betting you. So why should it possibly take me more than a second to check, right? Like that's your range just has all of that stuff and mine doesn't. Why? Even if I flopped a world, I'm always going to check whether I flop the world, I flop nothing, or I flop something in between. I'm always checking that flop. So why are we not auto checking these flops? Is a chess clock potentially the answer? Technologically, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing because there's so much technology. We can't even get like shuffle machines at every table at the Rio. But down the road, it would be really nice to see the chess clock answer, the kind of thing that where if you are a player that acts quickly, down the line, when you have this like, oh my God, I had 2 pair and this amateur is just shoved into me for 120 for 1.3x pot. Like I get to take 8 minutes on this one because I've banked a lot of this time. And do any future where we see this?
Well, no, because poker is not quick enough to advance and develop things that would make the game more exciting. I think that on a smaller scale, you could do this for a super high roller bowl or a poker masters. You could implement something like this, whether it's inside the table or whether everyone has their own clock. I think it actually would be fun to experiment with. But I think we should
on GG, that's what they do on the final tables, and it works great.
Well, online poker is different, of course. Yeah. Of course, you can always do this online poker. We're talking about live, though. And a lot of this discussion has been brought up, I think, because of the comments of, and I know this is somebody you work with, Norman Chad, like he was on the broadcast. He and Jamie Gerstetter were sort of debating this. Is this going on too slow? And Norm's taken the strong position that the players today are playing too slow, which is, you know what? Most of the time, I agree with this statement. I don't really play no limit hold'em tournaments anymore because I can't stand this pointless checking. The example I just gave where you're just instead of auto checking out of the big blind, you just kind of sit there for 5 seconds and look at the guy and then tap with one finger very gently on the felt so you don't give off any tells. Like I hate that shit. It drives me nuts. But when we're in day 6, day 7, day 8 of the main event, playing for unfathomable amounts of money, like literally like 100x and 1000x what these guys have ever cashed for lifetime, I think you got to cut them some slack when they're thinking about like, whether to call the second barrel with third pair or not.
Yeah, I think that's why what I was going to say is that you can never implement this in the main event. I think that the event attracts such a wide range of players. And if an inexperienced player who has 10K to burn needs a little extra time, in some very normal situations for people that play poker more often, then take as much time as you want. That's not going to ruin the game. What ruins the game from a time perspective is professional players who know that they're never going to lead a flop taking excessive amounts of time before checking. That's what ruins the game, and that's what also gives people that think in real spots. They give those people a bad rap. So.
It's contagious too, right?
Yeah,
so if you see like elite pro that if you're like a home game hero, you see this elite pro who plays in all the 50Ks do that, it makes you want to do that because you think it's the right thing to do because you're giving away information. If you don't take your requisite 10 seconds before you check on what's essentially an auto check situation, it's contagious, and it's like this thing that's sort of spread through the community, and hopefully we can draw it back a little.
I blame Tom Dwan on high stakes poker.
I mean, he was one of the first, but I mean, he's the thing is that like he was one of the first, but I don't think anybody ever did it thinking it was Tom Dwan. It's just when everybody started the idea of balance and equilibrium in poker and this sort of thing, like, well, you can't do one thing when you're weak and one thing when you're strong. That's when it started happening, and it's a natural thing. And but it's at some point you do have to rein it in a little bit. And then the other thing that upsets me while we're going on rants is sort of like the slate stalling near the bubble. And that's again, where I think the chess clock situation, maybe I have hope for one day down the line, but it's probably going to be real far down the line. But
yeah. And I think to go back to what you said about, Norman Chat taking a strong stance about the speed of play and Jamie defending the players. I think Norm was out of line. I think that he went too far in calling out slow play. I think that yes, there were some spots in which the decision making was very slow, but I think at the same time, the people that watch a live stream of a final table, the people that are within the audience that stays up till 4 a.m. East Coast time to watch an event like this, those are the kinds of people that also have an understanding of the game to a level where they know that sometimes people take more time. And I'll be the first to say, Koray played probably the slowest of all the players at the final table. Yeah. He was taking a lot of time. People can say, oh, he's probably more deliberate. He has more things to figure out because of, how many things he is considering. And we can criticize that, with some kind of infrequency to a point where it still makes sense, but you don't have to pile it on because they're still playing for $8 million. It's still a massive moment, and it's not day one of the tournament. I'm pretty sure that Koray plays a bit faster on day one of the tournament. I'm pretty sure he just wants to avoid mistakes at all costs. So, to Norman Chad ripping on players for taking a long time, I just think it's very out of place. I think also perhaps a little bit out of touch with live stream poker versus a cut down broadcast episodes where some of that stuff gets removed. And, I'm not denying that the game has gotten slower. I think it's true. And I think you and I are now sort of brainstorming how to combat that. But at the end of the day, I think on a live stream final table of this size, I think it's just par for the course.
Yeah, it really did seem that like Norm was upset by this. And I'm a guy who has advocated for faster play in poker. But the thing is, a lot of the times that he was going off were not clear cut decisions. It was not an obvious decision. Like a lot of these were just sort of these like second, third pair kind of gut shot, backdoor flush draw sort of hands where, you're going to need to make a decision there. And these are really interesting decisions. I sort of feel, when you talk about the live stream, it wanted me to talk about because Norman Lawn came to the forefront, it long before sort of the live stream area when we saw every hands, and it was this condensed package where every hand was interesting and every hand was exciting, and we edited out all of these long tanks because people still tanked in 2003, 2004. They just edited those out back then. And then I don't remember if the year we started doing every single hand final tables. It is like you say, a different product now, and maybe it's. I thought Lon and Jamie were fine on this, but Norm really just felt like it seemed to me like he just didn't want to be there. Like he wasn't interested. There was a hand that came up where there was like, I think both guys flopped top pair and the board ran out like such that it was a chop, like neither kicker played. And Norm was just like visibly upset. Like he just wanted this kind of thing to be over. And like you said, this thing was over at a very reasonable time. It could have 100 big blinds deep with both stacks even. It could have gone out. It could have gone like another 5 hours, no problem. And I just wonder, like, I think Norm still likes poker and likes being part of the community, but he doesn't really play no limit hold'em. He said that on his streams. I don't think I'm saying anything that he's never said before, but he likes playing, stud games and mixed games like that, but he doesn't really like no limit hold'em. Why don't we have the guys who like to talk about no limit hold'em, like Jamie Kurtstetter, like Nick Schulman? Why don't we have those guys alongside for these long broadcasts? And then you can always have Norm back in to do what he does to sort of add flavor to the game on the edited broadcasts. I don't know.
Yeah, you put it right. From my perspective, given how the game has evolved and given how there is a constant craving from the audience for high level strategy talk, as well as some jokes and some nuance and some Nick Schulman telling Ali Najat to shut the fuck up, like that, there's definitely a craving for that in the game of poker. And I believe very strongly that there's no better way to consume a cut down televised episode of the main event than having Lon and Norm together on the call, because to me, that is what the main event is all about, because they represent that feeling that we all have from learning the game, coming up in the game, and watching the World Series Poker main event with our friends. So that feeling, I think that nostalgia is still there.
Right.
For a 12-hour live stream, I mean, I much rather listen to a pairing that is up to speed on the modern techniques of the game, and also has a way to keep things lighthearted when things are slow. And you roll with the punches in a situation like that. And I think Nick and Ali do a really good job at that. They also annoy the shit out of me sometimes. I'll be the first to say that, not all they say is gold, but I think that they have a better understanding of what the audience needs and looks for. I'll also make a strong case for Jeff and Brent. When they are on the call together, they have that sort of like that sense of humor together that plays really well. Brent makes up silly nicknames for the players, but all of a sudden he can also switch gears and give you very good strategic analysis because he stays on top of the game. And Jeff is just world-class play-by-play. So I hope that in the future, in no limit hold'em formats of these live streams, we get to see more of that. And I'll give Norm some credit here. I tremendously enjoyed his commentary on some of the mixed games this fall, because I could tell, like you said, that he's excited about it. He was excited about it.
Yeah.
He was telling, he was telling stories in his traditional sense, but he was also providing some analysis, which is funny too, because Norm is usually not in that spot, but he clearly knows what he's talking about, or at least more so when it comes to those mixed games. And it's also towards a different audience. Now, the audience that watches mixed games, that is a different audience than the audience that tunes in for the main event. Or, I mean, there's overlap, but it's not the it is exactly the same audience.
This is something you definitely know better than me, but I mean, we're definitely past the point where people with no interest in poker are watching the main event. Probably, like, most of the people who are watching the main event are at least sort of poker adjacent. They're at least casuals, but I think they do, I think a fun part of it is playing along at home and saying, like, oh, what would I do with that guy's hand? Or what would you do if this card came off? And that's the analysis that I wish I would have seen, because it's not, I don't expect, obviously Norman and Lon to talk about, he's got, this blocker and he can bluff in this card, but to sort of ask, if you've got Jamie in there as the person who's the analysis person, ask her questions, like, why did he choose this sizing instead of this sizing? I think that these are things that you can do to fill these long gaps that occur, like, what's he thinking about here? Like, what's his plan if these cards come off? I think that stuff is still interesting to the person who subscribes, because I don't know, again, you know your subscriber demographic much better than me, but PokerGo is a thing that you sign up for, you sign up for the whole year. I would assume most of the people who sign up, they don't just only watch the World Series of Poker. They're watching other stuff. They might watch more hours during the World Series of Poker, but you're probably hoping that they don't cancel their subscription as soon as the main event shuts off. So you've got to find a way to get these guys interested all the time, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's poker fans are interested in a variety of things, and the main event final table is where we all come together and everybody watches that. So I feel like because of how big that spot is and how big that moment is, you need to respect the game, and you need to provide the game with the current up-to-date analysis. When I watch football on Sunday, and I don't know much about football at all, but when I watch football on Sunday, my Twitter timeline is full of people ripping on the commentary for not understanding basic mathematics. So you can sort of extrapolate that into poker in a way in which also that has to stay with the current times. And you don't have to like slap everyone with GTO in their face every 5 minutes, but you do have sort of a platform to educate an audience that might not otherwise not tune in to every final table throughout the year, that could be interested in, learning a bit more in that way, and harping and ripping on people taking excess amount of time. Probably not the right spot for it, because you are speaking to such a wide audience there.
Especially when there are things that you could be talking about. I totally agree. Speaking of hands, did you have interesting, like what are some of your favorite hands, either from the final table or before the final table? I'm sure you've digested a lot of this. You mentioned the Alejandro Lococo Papo MC, the play against Koray Aldemir. He's got pocket tens, and Koray Aldemir 3-bets him with pocket nines. Basically bets every street, geometrically grows the pot on Jack 9 8 3. So Koray flops a full house, geometrically grows the pot so that he can get Lococo all in on the river. And Lococo almost, speaking of playing fastly, playing fast, maybe played a little bit too fast here. Didn't really think this one over, or maybe he had already made up his mind. Snap called with pocket tens. I mean, that had to be a hand where even though a player busted and everybody laddered, I had to think the other players at the table were just like, oh God, like Koray just picked up, like the best player at the table just picked up even more chips. Fan-fucking-tastic.
Yeah, I mean, that hand, I'll never fully understand what happened there, because Lococo was in a spot to just coast to 3-handed play. He had such a massive stack. And for him to get into a spot where he's risking all his chips versus the chip leader, who's also the best player at the table, was just really, really mind-blowing to me.
Well, he has to call every street up to that, right? Because it comes Jack 9. He's got tens. He's obviously going to continue there. 8 picks up an open ender too. So he's got boat outs and open ender outs if he's not good, and he has a lot of equity. It's the final decision, right? And it's a really healthy, I don't remember if it was pot size or over pot size, really healthy bet on the river because of the way that, Koray obviously played this like the pro that he is. You just have to think like, not only like, what are you beating and how am I in my range here? It's like, man, like you said, all this stuff, like you can fold here and still have a lot of chips. But I mean, it's funny because it's almost the opposite of the winning hand that we talked about, where the not, I don't want to say hero call, but like the big call was correct. And what I said before is like, sometimes you call and you just look really stupid. It's a tough spot for him, but it was interesting because were you cheering at all for him because he is the biggest crossover star of this final table?
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping for Lococo to go heads up with Koray, and George Holmes became more and more of a fan favorite as the final table went on. But in that very moment, I was just hoping for Lococo all the way. We saw an insane amount of traffic from South America during the first part of the final table. I had to shut down dozens of illegal streams where people were restreaming it and with their own Spanish commentary. I found myself in the Lococo Papo MC Discord channel, people link sharing and stuff like that.
Wow.
So there was a lot of buzz around him, and then Donnie Peters, my colleague who I do the PokerGo WSP podcast with, he spoke to Felipe Ramos and asked him straight up, how big is Papo MC in South America? And Felipe told him, like, as big as any rapper is in the US. So
wow.
This guy's like a real big deal.
So he would be like the way that like an Eminem or a Dr. Dre would be. That's unbelievable. Like,
yeah. So he is like an actual superstar, and we saw it in the numbers as far as the YouTube chat is a good example. The YouTube chat was probably 50% Spanish up until he busted. So that was pretty insane, and you can also tell by the numbers on YouTube from the elimination hand, which got 300,000 views in 48 hours. There's tons of interest in him, and if he would have lasted longer, that would have been, I think, better for the broadcast. But I also think that him winning over $1 million probably means that we'll see him more and more into the future. And now that we know who he is, because we had no idea prior to him making this big run, we'll make an effort to feature him more because he clearly has a big audience that loves to see him play. But you asked me about my favorite hand. That was definitely one of them because of how crazy the punt was. Also, I think probably my favorite one is George Holmes folding ace queen of hearts. Showing the queen. That's probably my favorite hand. And this is the beauty of George Holmes. I asked him when he busted about that hand in particular, and I asked, I think I said something like, in a few spots you pressured him in the right spots, and in a few spots you folded also correctly. And I said, did you have something on him? Did you see something? And then he just gave like the most straight up basic answer that a player like that would give. He goes, I just had a feeling.
It's great.
You don't have to explain it. You just have a feeling, and you just toss the.
Well, and he could have lied, and he said, "Yeah, like I totally read him, and I knew he was strong, but he didn't. Like that's not the kind of guy that George Holmes is. I mean, I saw another interview. Maybe it was you, or maybe it was somebody else, but somebody asked if they had that he was able to get up reads on Koray, and he was like, I mean, I would love to say that yes, but like really, like come on, like it's just it's great. But the hand you're referencing, it's amazing. If I have this right, I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's Koray raises with ace king, and George Holmes just flats with ace queen suited in the big blind, heads up. Flop comes down jack 10-10. It goes check bet call, right? Yeah. It just goes check bet call. A king, a queen on the turn gives Koray the nut straight and gives Holmes top pair. Holmes checks and calls again. He's got the royal draw too. He's got ace queen of hearts, so it's like jack of hearts, 10 of hearts, 10 of something else. He makes top pair to go with them. Turn check calls again. The river's just a offsuit 7. He checks. Aldemir bets healthy, and he just folds and shows it face up. And I was just like, it was so great because if you're just watching some of what George Holmes does, you just think, oh, he's an aggro spaz, and as soon as he's going to go broke soon enough. But the fact that it was a big laydown that was one of his most epic moments makes it even better. It wasn't just like, oh, here's this guy and he's 3-betting 6 deuce and he's getting lucky and he's making these big bluffs and these guys just happen to not be able to call him. It was that like, man, he could just make a huge laydown too. That like again, not by the book lay down in any way. I mean, I didn't put it through the solver or anything, but it's like folding top pair there is so huge. That was fantastic to see. And then I think it was just before that he really set the tone for this, that he did 3-bet the 5 deuce offsuit when Koray opened the button. Koray had 7-3 of hearts and called the 3-bet. And Holmes just barrels off on the 10-6-3 deuce ace flop, 10-6 ace, 10-6-3 deuce ace river, and Koray's just sitting there at the end of it. He's got like 4th pair. He's got all right, folds, and he gets the pot stolen from him by bottom pair. It's just it was so great just watching this, and again, happened in real time.
Terrence, it makes me think though, and the question for you here. I would say I'm a very, very average no limit player, but I have good understanding of how certain concepts work. And I got my first cash at the WSOP this year in a little 1-for-1 drop, meaning that I could now sell at 1.3 markup in any future poker tournament that I play. But my question for you is, does George Holmes have talent for poker? Because when I watch those hands, him folding the ace queen, him triple barreling with 5 deuce offsuit, when I think of my poker skill and where I'm at in the game, I don't see myself making those kinds of moves. And sure, I might not play the 5 deuce to begin with, but is that talent that he displays there pulling off moves like this?
I mean, I think any pro poker player will tell you that it's easier to take a guy who's just too aggressive and too like spewy in some spots and turn that guy into an elite player than to take the guy who's naturally just like too tight and overfolds and get him to expand his range. There's just something that you have to have just a little bit of gamble to be successful at this game. And, you realize, okay, well, 5 deuce off, 3-betting it is a bit spewy even for heads up, but you have to remember there's a big blind ante in play, right? So back in the old days, we just used to have the ante, so it would be literally the ante would be a quarter of the size that it is now in heads up play. You've just got to get in there and mix it up. And you saw Koray doing that too when Holmes would 2.5x the button. Koray would defend with some trash as well, and so that's just like the correct thing to do sometimes. And then of course, when you've got the 5 deuce and it runs 10-6-3 deuce ace, I mean, you block the nut straight. So that means you have to just fire all your strips into the pot. That's all you have to know about poker today is if you have one blocker to the nuts, you just put all the chips in. And if they call, well, you just got unlucky or they played bad.
Exactly.
Really to know. Then you can charge 1.5x markup.
See, that's why I want to be on Poker News with a hand history where I'm all in with the naked ace of spades and I can just tell my investors like I had a blocker.
Yeah, they can't say anything. They're like, "Oh yeah, right, that's true." It's an interesting thing, and maybe you can shed some more light on this production-wise. But the final table was supposed to go to four-handed, and then pause to play the final four. It's supposed to go from nine-handed to four-handed. I'm guessing they didn't stop at four-handed because it just kind of happened a lot more quickly than you thought, and you thought maybe the last day would go too wrong. What's the process there? Because I was surprised when it got down to four-handed that there was still poker happening.
Yeah, so there's some very real concern in a situation where one guy has all the chips and you get down to four-handed too quickly, that the final day takes too long and basically, sends people playing until 6 a.m, which when you look at the amount of hands that were played and you play 2-hour levels, we got extremely lucky to end this thing. Was it like 9:30 p.m. or 10 p.m., whenever it was? Yeah. So when they say we play down to four-handed, it is on the assumption that it's going to be a long day before we get to that point and burn some clock before we get into the final day of play. And I think that if they would have, because this was already announced before the tournament was announced itself, if they had known that they would not have a day off in between, they would have probably even said, because the players were going to be exhausted, to play even longer, because then you don't have a chance that heads up play, both guys are falling asleep, and that will slow the play down even more. When you have two exhausted players that are going heads up at midnight after playing for 9 days straight, it's not going to help the product, both as a player but also as a viewer. So those rules are sort of tournament director discretion. Maury Eskandani is always in direct contact with Jack Effel about stuff like this, and the ideal scenario is to create 2 days that are of equal length. But of course, it's poker, so it's really hard to predict that. And then I'm not sure what the exact conversations were like, but I can only imagine that if the stacks were even deeper, there's even an argument to be made to say, hey, we want to keep playing until we get the heads up, because this might be a 10-hour heads up match, which we've seen in the past happen many times. So it's a bit of back and forth with regards to when do we really stop. Jack Oliver was making a bit of a stink about it. It's his right to do that. But at the same time, there's a lot of factors at play, and I think that this was a good solution to play it out in this way.
Why did Jack want to continue playing? I'm not sure. Like, why did he feel that was beneficial, or for him or for the game?
He was pointing at the rules and saying it says here to play down to 4. And from what I noticed of him after play wrapped up and the way he was talking to his friends, is that he really wanted to A, get some sleep, and B, get back into the solver streets and run some more numbers on his opponents, because they got down to four-handed play. So I think for him, it was those two factors that made him want to stop for the day and come back tomorrow.
But at the end of the day, it's not, because I think a lot of people have the impression that this is like a made for TV decision, but you're saying it's sort of a combination made for TV, but also like Jack Effel in the World Series.
Yeah, nobody wants to be here till 6 a.m, because it means that you have exhausted players, exhausted staff, and the vast majority of your audience also tunes out because of the time zones that we're in. Makes it hard already to watch if you're on the East Coast, let alone in Europe. So I think it's just the right approach, in my opinion, is to always play the final table of the main event in 3 chapters, because it is such a slow structure. It's 2-hour levels. So if things break wrong, like we've seen with John Sin, for example, you're going to be there till 6 a.m, and no one enjoys that. Yeah,
and nobody's going to be watching at 6 in the morning. I mean, you got to be pretty hardcore. It almost ends up you get more than you bargained for, because after the 5th place bust out, when you end up continuing played four-handed, there was almost a double bust out. Oliver ends up shoving the cutoff with Jack Knight of Diamonds. Josh Remedios reshoves I think he's got a little bit more. I think Oliver had like 20 million. Remedios had 27 million. He's got Ace Jack offsuit, and then just Koray Aldemir wakes up with pocket queens. He's like, yeah, I'll take all the chips now, please. And almost got us to heads up right away, but the board did not cooperate. It ran out 10-9-8. 3-7, but with 3 diamonds. So Oliver making a flush, Remedios making a straight to take that part of the main pot away from Koray. One of the very few things that ever went wrong for Aldemir during this entire final table is that he could not bust 2 players and just make it like heads up with Holmes, like just right away. Wouldn't that have been interesting?
Yeah, and it's funny that we had a 3-way all in, because it's very rare, obviously. But it immediately made me go back to the Scott Blumstein year, where we had a 3-way all in during 3-handed play. it was Benjamin Pollock shoved, Dan Ott reshoved, and Blumstein called, and he could have ended the tournament right there. But instead, Pollock busted, Ott won the pot, and we went into heads-up play, and that took quite a while. But yeah, it's rare to see, and the more the better. I'm totally signing up for a 4-way all-in next year.
Yeah, 4-way all-in, and yeah, I mean that'll make like international news, because as much as we talk about how it was so cool that Aldemir had this like tough call with 2 pair on the river, like if there's just like an aces versus kings versus queens versus jacks, like the mainstream media will just like lose their mind, and we'll all just be like, LOL, poker is stupid. But it will be everywhere, and it'll be hilarious because the jacks are problem.
That's a very good point you make. Yeah. Some of our best performing clips on social media are quads versus quads,
right?
7 deuce beating aces, and Lococo giving it all away. So it's that type of stuff that goes beyond the inner circle.
When Connor Drynan lost with aces in the 1-drop, like people would come up to me in the MMA gym and be like, "Did you see this hand?" Like I'd be like, "What? You were watching this?"
That's probably one of the most viewed poker hands like of all time. Versus aces for sure.
Yep. Couple more things, and then I know you've been at the Rio for a real long time, but just a couple of things that have happened the last day. Elezra was inducted into the Poker Hall of Fame, and then he kind of hopped in the Hall of Fame tournament that they have at the Rio. Who did you have going into this thing, thinking that they were going to win it? Who would you like to see? Are you disappointed that anybody didn't get in, or what are your thoughts on Ellie becoming the 2021 Poker Hall of Fame nominee?
I think Ellie is a very deserving member of the Poker Hall of Fame. The Poker Hall of Fame is such a strange topic for me to discuss because there's so much wrong with the Poker Hall of Fame. The voting process,
preach it, brother.
The voting process. The amount of inductees, the string of random people that may or may not have ever played poker that were inducted in the early goings of the Hall of Fame, maybe to fluff it up a little bit, that's kind of cool, but we don't know much about some of these people. So from my perspective, there's a lot wrong with the Hall of Fame. A lot of people need to be at it before it starts making sense again, but I think we're maybe like a whole generation away from having that because the voters are the ones that are in the Hall of Fame. And so it's kind of become an old boys club in that way that some of those players are getting in. Having said that, I think Elezra definitely belongs in the Poker Hall of Fame. But if we look at the cut and dried criteria of the Poker Hall of Fame, it becomes much more complicated than that. But that's not the way I want to look at it. When I think of Elezra, I think of a player who's inspired millions of people from around the world with his play and his antics during high stakes poker and poker after dark. And he is just one of those people that is synonymous with the poker boom. So I think he belongs in the Poker Hall of Fame for his contributions to the game. And on top of that, he has a lot of accomplishments. So in my mind, I sort of make up my own little sort of rule set for the Poker Hall of Fame. And I think under those rules, I think Ellie definitely qualifies.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I mean, I think that I would have made Ellie the money favorite going in just because we know who's voting on it, and the people who are voting on it are largely, for a large part, friends of Ellie. Not to say that he doesn't deserve it at all, but if you were going to make a betting market on it, you can just go through the Poker Hall of Fame and be like, okay, well, where are these people's votes going to go? And you can kind of figure this out. And we didn't get any, at least that I saw, a list of vote breakdown. I remember last year, or was it 2019, we actually saw how many votes each participant got, which was really interesting to me because, that was the fun part of the story. Like, because I think everybody had 10 votes and you could distribute them how you wanted, and we could kind of see how close people were. Adam and I will go to our graves saying that Isai Scheinberg needs to be in the Hall of Fame, and it is not a legitimate Hall of Fame until he's not, even though he's never going to be. So that to me invalidates it. I'm obviously biased because Isai gave me a lot, and I owe a lot to him, but so does the rest of the poker world. I mean, most of us doing all this content creation stuff, we're not here if Isai doesn't play such a huge, incredible, pivotal part in, it's the moneymaker effect, but there's no moneymaker if there's no Isai Scheinberg. And to me, it's just like a travesty. I would love to see the voting to see if he's even getting votes. But, as you just pointed out, the voting process is just like the guys who are in it already. And they're probably, for the most part, other than maybe Daniel, because he knows he owes a lot to Isai too, like just not going to, the votes aren't going to him.
Here's a fun twist for you, Terrence. In the coming years, a lot of the players that came up during the moneymaker boom era are turning 40.
Yes.
And those players will all vote for Isai Scheinberg because they understand the context and they have a better perspective. And on top of that, they don't view the current players that are on this list as players that deserve to be in, because they had all their accomplishments during a time in which the game was a lot easier. Now, I'm not saying that the Matasaus and Mizrakis of this world don't belong in the Poker Hall of Fame, because they probably do.
They're saying there's sort of less respect for people who kind of crushed it in the 90s and the 2000s, and
right. So it's a very interesting situation, because Brian Rast turns 40 in November, and then in the coming years, the entire top tier of super high rollers will turn 40 year after year after year.
People who started playing online poker when they were like 19 and 20 years old are now starting to turn 40. And it's going to be a problem. You can't just induct one people, because look how many there were 6,700 people in the main event. How many people were in the main event in 1995? Like, how are we even still inducting one person in 1995 and inducting one person now? Like, you're going to have people with like 6 WSOP bracelets who aren't even getting on the ballot, right? Like, that's kind of absurd. Like that's what you're.
Brian Rast, in my opinion, first ballot Hall of Famer for all that he's accomplished against the opposition that he's done it against. But then also look at Phil Galfond, Bryn Kenny, players that have crushed it through these eras in which the game got tougher and they evolved with the game. So it's going to be so hard for players like a Mike Matasau or even someone like a Matt Savage to get in once these people become eligible. The only thing that still gets them in is probably the way the voting currently works, where I don't think Doyle Brunson is going to vote for Bryn Kenny, just the name of Side Street there. So it's a very broken system. There's a lot wrong with it. And it's a matter of time before it ultimately sort of corrects itself. But we might still be 10 or 15 years away from that.
Yeah, the boom of players turning 40 is going to be wild. I mean, I'm looking at the rest of my show notes because I wanted to go over what was the rest of the World Series. But just real quick, 2 guys winning bracelets this week. Brian Hastings won his 5th bracelet in the 10K stud 8 or better. And just a couple hours ago, Benny Glazer won his 4th bracelet in 10K Raz. These 2 guys haven't hit 35. But I think Benny's 31 and Hastings is 33. Like, what's the ceiling for them? I mean, when guys like Ben Yu and Sean Deeb and like all these guys are good to have like a pile of bracelets, you're still going to only induct 1 a year. And then you talked about guys like Matt Savage and Isai Scheinberg. They should be completely separate. I mean, it makes, how do you compare Matt Savage and Isai Scheinberg's contributions to Brian Rast's? Like, this is as apples and oranges it gets.
It's so true. And I think also by only inducting one person per year, we're doing the whole industry a disservice, because there are so many players that qualify under the current rules, even though I don't agree with the current rules, but I think so many players do qualify. And this is only going to become more and more evident when we have to wait 7 years for Steven Chidwick to get in once he turns 40 and he has $90 million in career tournament earnings.
Exactly. Well, it's true. It's something's got to give it at one point in this, but that's Adam and I's annual tradition, is to rant about the Poker Hall of Fame and how much nonsense it is. So I'm really glad that you could become a part of this.
Invite me for this annual get together.
Let's do it every year after the Poker Hall of Fame. We'll just shit on it.
Well, what I wanted to make now, I want to make a under 40 power rankings, and then slap some odds on them. As far as when will they finally get in, because of the way the voting works, I think it's going to be a long time before someone like a Brian Rast gets in, even though he's going to be on the ballot next year for sure. Yeah,
that's wild. Really funny, interesting news item that just popped across my feed coming out of the 250K. I don't know if you saw this, but in the 250K, Christoph Vogelsang came up with a COVID contract. And so what they did was, the high roller community is obviously very different than the rest of the World Series tournaments, because it's such a small field and these guys all know each other. They bought a bunch of COVID tests and they just stacked them on a table. And they said, we want everybody to be tested, and everybody just agreed to do it. They all signed the contract. And then they say, okay, so if you come back on day 2 and you test positive, we're going to pay you out. It wasn't clear to me how to pay out. I assume it was some sort of like ICM, but they talked about Seth Davies gave an interview. I think it was with Chad Holloway, and said there was like proportional to prize pool. A little bit of insurance. I assume this can only be based off the Chris Brewer situation. Are you familiar with this that happened?
You mentioned it, and I'm scrolling through the Poker News updates, and John Sofin did a good write up on it. And he did say that it was because of Chris Brewer testing positive that he decided to draw up this sort of napkin contract. Seems like a pretty brilliant idea given the sort of state of the world right now. And it seems as though only one player disagreed. And now, of course, it's curious to speculate on that. But I think it's a good sign that the players were all in agreement on this.
It's especially because the COVID really does seem to be making this as like late surge at the World Series of Poker. It was kind of one of the real bright spots of this World Series that we just I think most people, or I certainly did, thought there would probably be a significant COVID outbreak a couple weeks into the World Series, and then the 2-week mark went by, and then 3 weeks, and then 4 weeks, and we never really had anything. And then just in the last sort of week, we had a big rash of a lot of people testing positive. And so obviously it's a tough moral dilemma when these guys play poker for a living, they're playing for high stakes. And, you bring in, if you bring in like 400K of equity into the next day because you've doubled your chip stack, and to say that, you don't get to play this tournament anymore. I thought it was a really clever idea, really innovative. But the super high roller community is nothing but innovative right. In terms of this. Yeah.
I think it's great. And I think it's cool that it was done among the players, because if it comes down from the tournament directors, this never works.
Yeah, no, it's never going to be sanctioned by the World Series of Poker, but I thought that was cool. Yeah, I don't know if you had any other thoughts about this. I mean, I feel like we've had a good discussion of the World Series final table and everything that's happened in poker. I was super excited that you were able to join us. But do you have any last thoughts?
I have some anger. I need to.
Oh, please. You're inside the reel. You're in the right place for anger.
Alina Jad is throwing fruit at me, by the way.
Wow.
Across the room.
Want me to hurt him? I could physically hurt him.
I caught a piece of the orange that he's tossed at me.
That's pretty nice.
I'm surprised Alina Jad actually eats fruit. I feel like he's more of a.
Ask him if he's been meditating.
Oh, that's actually kind of good. I'll eat this after the show. What the anger that I wanted to get off my chest. Stop. Okay, I'm getting bombarded with oranges here. It's actually pretty funny. This does not translate well to audio. Sorry, listeners. If this even makes the show. No, my anger is about the small stack sizes.
Yes, we totally didn't talk about this, but as a TV guy, yeah. So I think it was Rich Ryan tweeted, and this was when Koray Aldemir was chip leader 7-handed. I think he had like 35% of the chips. And he had like 3 physical stacks of chips in front of him. The color up police are just insane on this one.
So I the argument is, and I talked to tournament directors about this. The argument is, and by the way, Matt Savage, if you're listening, I hate your guts for this because he's the one campaigning this. He's in our Discord channel.
He does not get your Hall of Fame vote.
No, not until he changes his stance on this. He's in our Discord channel, and we send in photos of all these dumb small stacks, and he goes, yeah, speed of play. Well, guess what? If everyone has to make change every third hand, the speed of play is completely gone also, and there is nothing more frustrating than making change. I hate making change. Everyone hates making change. It just slows down the game tremendously, especially when the dealer is just going around trying to get someone to surrender a few chips here and there. But also, it just looks stupid. If you Google Scott Clements chips,
that's one of the best photos ever taken.
I know. Or if you Google Dario Minieri main event, or if you look up Jamie Gold from his 06 run, those are the iconic moments that made me want to play poker. We used to play a home game, but back in 06 or whenever it was, and I bought like a 500 chip stack. We played with 5 people, and all the chips were in play. Like we always had racks of chips, and we had so much fun, and it made no sense, but it was just amazing. And the feeling of having a lot of chips, especially in a big tournament, there is nothing like it. And when you can throw in 20 big blinds with 1 chip, it sort of ruins the experience for me.
It absolutely does. There's so many visceral things, like the dealer pushing you the big pot. You turn over your hand, the other guy mucks, and the dealer just shoves like this pile of chip, and it's noisy. It's so loud. It has to be pushed over you. It's like clanking your ears. Takes you like 2 more hands to even stack the fucking thing.
Yeah, and then you have this moment where you can still raise with the unstacked chips. You know,
Yes.
there's something magical about this. And there's one funny moment from the 04 main event. For people that are fans of the WSOP Classic on PokerGo, we have all that stuff. And I've been rewatching a lot of it in the last few months. When Marcel Lusk was going deep in the 04 main event, there's a moment where he wins a huge pot off of Harry Dimitriou. And then the dealer pushes him the chips. And it's so many physical chips that he stands up and he goes, "Give him to me. Don't give him to everyone." Like, because the chips are literally...
That's right. I remember that.
They're spread out across 4 seats, like
Yeah.
seat 9 until seat 6. They all have the chips in front of them. It's just amazing to like look at those
Yeah,
moments.
that's probably like maybe too much. Like I could see a tournament director getting a heart attack like about that. I get that, but like the chip leader should have more than 3 stacks of chips. Like you got to get up. Like if you're the chip leader, I want at least 3 racks in a no limit tournament. Like it's got to be right, and even more so in the limit tournaments, because like you don't actually have to make changes aggressively in limit tournaments, because like you don't have to count people down. Like it's not really that important if I know whether you have like 9 bets behind or 11 bets behind. It's all the same. So like you don't have to color up as aggressively even in the limit tournaments. But yeah, the chip leader should look like the physical chip leader. You should be a guy like standing on the bleachers in the Thunderdome, like you can barely see the feature table, and you should be able to see that guy's the chip leader.
Right.
And
I think the easiest way to combat that is to not put the 5 million chips into play until, you know, your heads up or something like that. The 5 million chips really ruin it, even though they look really sexy. They do ruin it because they make the stack so small. I think that this is also a thing to consider. Maybe when you get moved to the feature table anywhere else in the tournament other than the final table, there's a color down. You just have more chips because it looks better on TV.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, but you're right though, that I think every table does deserve to not have to make change and like go to like the worst is like you're sitting in like the 3 seat and the 1, 2, and the 4 all don't have change. So you have to toss like your big chip across the table after you've lost this pot and be like, ask the guy in seat 9 to make change for you. Like, oh God, like what are we doing over here?
Very frustrating.
That's a great rant.
I will always fight Matt Savage on this. By the way, speed of play. We've stopped caring about speed of play a long time ago. Let's be honest. Let's just worry about the aesthetics of the game.
Get shuffle machines on every table. That'll speed up the play more than color chips.
I agree.
Fantastic. Anything else to end on? This is one of the last times you'll speak into a microphone at the Rio All Suites Hotel and Casino. Are you going to miss it?
The air that I'm breathing has the smell of dead poker dreams, which is fantastic, and I'll miss it forever. I'll miss a lot about this place. What I miss the most is like the back hallway access to everything, the amazing parking, and just the Amazon room. The Amazon room has to go into the Poker Hall of Fame. It's iconic. Like it's just such a cool place. It's like Bobby's room. Donnie was saying that they when they renamed Staples Center to the crypto stadium or whatever it's called now, he says they'll never call it the crypto.com arena. They'll always call it Staples Center because that's such an iconic name. I'm worried that next year when we're deep in the main that I'm going to be referring to whatever the room is as the Amazon room.
I mean, this has been an entire 2.5 months of people calling October and November summer. We can't stop saying like summer. Oh yeah, and a good start to my summer. People can't stop saying we don't even know it's fucking cold, right? Like it's like we can't even call it summer. We're such creatures of habit.
It's also because once you enter this building,
it does feel like winter.
Time stands still, and it's just as cold now as it is in July.
True.
It's like a very steady 56 degrees in here, and outside it's usually double that. So it's a very specific sort of feeling once you enter this building. The lighting is always the same. The food is always equally terrible at the Poker Kitchen. It's an experience unlike any other. And now we're going to step away from that, and I'm going to miss it. But I also think that having seen some photos and having heard from people that have already walked the Bally's Convention Center, it is an insanely enormous space. From the looks of it, it reminded me a little bit of the ballroom at PCA from what the first photos that I saw. Just a very big room where lots of poker is going to be played. And I hope that they get staffing sorted. I hope we no longer have to play 10-handed. And then we're only
we just beat COVID by then too. That'd be sweet too if there just wasn't COVID anymore.
Exactly. I mean, most people in this country pretend like it's already gone. So
that's right. It's not a thing.
But yeah, so we're only 6 months away from the next WSOP by the time this thing ends. And we have, by the way, I mean, quick plug, we have 3 more streams on PokerGo, the 250K, the 100K, and the 50K. Those are all happening over the course of the next 3 days. the PokerGo WSP podcast, hosted by myself and Donnie Peters. We're going to do 3 more shows, one for each of those final tables, and then going forward, we'll be doing those shows weekly. So if you just search for WSP podcast on your favorite podcasting app, I'll promise you can listen to the DAT Poker podcast and then to ours. You'll have enough time in your week to cross both of those off. So
that's what we won't be upset if you turn it to the 1.2x speed on your podcast player.
Oh, see, there you go. I'm probably very hard to listen to at 1.2 speed because I already talk at 1.3. So
that's always good. Well, it matches your markup that way. So yeah, I'm with you. I will miss the Rio. So we won't be going there anymore. But one thing that hopefully we won't have to miss is hooking up with you, Remko. I look forward to seeing you at the next World Series of Poker at Bally's in Paris and getting together to chat poker with you. It's fantastic. We should absolutely do it more often. And check out all the stuff that Remko does with PokerGo and the podcast and everything like that. And you've done an amazing job at this World Series of Poker, and you deserve a nice break and a beverage of your choice. And so go on and enjoy it, man.
Thank you so much, guys.
All right. To everybody out there, have a great week at the tables. Enjoy it, and we'll talk to you again soon.
See ya.